In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Please note the explicit content indicator. This means that I use adult language. I do not speak in a humorless, public radio hushed monotone. I am excited and enthusiastic about the information that I present and the topics I discuss. You will hear ice rattle in my glass throughout the show. On the show, I joke about bodily functions, sex acts, religion, and politics. The topics may seem random or scattered through the back catalog. A list of show topics in chronological order is provided on the featured topic link at abercast.com. If any of these issues might trigger you, this might not be the podcast for you, and I wish you good luck finding a show more to your liking. It's that time again. The music is low. The party is over. The fire is dying down, and all the ordinary people passed out long ago. Now we are the only ones left. Welcome, everybody. This is John Towers. This is the end of an era. We are putting our Zarathustra project to bed this evening, and I couldn't be happier. We've learned a lot of stuff, but it's been a long journey. So let's get on with it, shall we? Yeah, we're going to get on with it, bro. So if you're playing along at home, please join me in toasting in gratitude to my Patreon and Subscribestar supporters. Here's to us, to the kisses we've snatched, and vice versa. Thank you, supporters. So, like all the other Lessons of Zarathustra episodes, I took 3 different summaries from 3 different kind of points of view for each of the speeches, and we're going to go through these. So the first one is from Sparknotes. The second one is from Existentialism. It's an existentialist view on Thus Spake Zarathustra. And then the last one is basically just like a straight up cut and dry, kind of examination of it, and that's from Grade Saver. So if you remember the last time we did a lessons episode, it's like maybe like a month and a half, maybe even 2 months ago. It was Lessons of Zarathustra, the Many Lessons of Zarathustra, part 7. So this is part 8, and it's going to be a jumbo size episodes, bro. And the first speech we're starting on is the speech, it seems like way back, it seems like a very long time ago, on Apostates. Zarathustra finds to his dismay that many of his disciples have turned to God. They found it more comforting to have faith than to struggle forward alone. Zarathustra suggests that when the old gods died, they died from laughter at the God who said, "There is one God, thou shalt have no gods before me." In the Existentialism paper, here is Zarathustra's joke about why there is only one God, and all the other gods laughed to death when the one God proclaimed himself the God. And the great saver on Apostates, Zarathustra deals with those who have tried to learn from him during his journey and perhaps driven to such a speech by the full teacher. In the previous chapter, Zarathustra gives a speech differentiating between those who follow him and those who are truly his disciples. And the first kind of person, Zarathustra says, listens to his teachings at first, but then crawls back to the cross of traditional teachings and virtue. When difficulty arises for these people, the pressure and the temptation to embrace the old teachings is simply too much to bear. If a person follows his teachings, Zarathustra says, this person will also experience the hardship that he himself had gone through. Those who waver cannot truly be his disciples. In the second part of the speech, Zarathustra speaks directly to these faltering disciples, and he mocks them for their lack of courage, and he wants to believe in his teachings, but they also want to believe in the teaching of Christianity and hold on to the hope that there is a God. Zarathustra tells them that this is not the way. He predicts that a dark night is coming that will blacken the old ways of thinking. This is the threat of nihilism of which Zarathustra had been dreaming. Only through his teaching will anyone be able to escape such a fate. Yes, Zarathustra does not give hope to those who do not embrace his teachings. This speech is the last speech that Zarathustra makes to men before he retreats to his solitude. It is a warning on the onset of the dark night of nihilism, and Zarathustra predicts will overtake the land, and this event will ultimately kill God. Just as the previous centuries of old gods and Greeks were killed by the belief in one God. But Zarathustra is not hopeful that anyone who clings to the old virtues, the values, will survive. At the end of this speech, Zarathustra retreats from the town of the Motley Cow and travels towards his mountain home. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. I can only get like 20 minutes into the movie, so that's the only one I know. Returning home, Zarathustra returns to his home in the mountains and delights in his solitude, and he remarks on how peculiar humans are, and that they talk but they say nothing, and that the good among them are the most spiteful. The return home, Zarathustra once again returns to his solitude and the dangers of pity. Zarathustra returns to his cave and to his solitude, a state that he describes as having the qualities of a mother who nurtures her young. The solitude will nurture him and enable the great transcendence that he seeks. Once Zarathustra reaches his silence, however, he realizes that he no longer needs to be silent in the safety of his cave. The restrained silence he practiced in the market, preparing him to be able to return to his cave and converse freely. He begins a conversation with solitude, saying all being wants to become word. All becoming wants to learn from me how to speak. He contrasts the freedom of speech that he has found in his solitude to the restrictions of speech imposed upon him by humanity. Zarathustra's speech here is the speech of true philosophy. And he describes true being a state that he could not attain without his solitude. The speech of the regular world is simple prattle to Zarathustra. Though philosophers might try to find being in their words, their speech actually masks the true nature of being. As Zarathustra continues to speak, to his solitude, new ways being opened up before him. So I've gone on, I've yabbled, I don't know, I've babbled on and on through this process of reading this book and examining it, and marveled about how it seems like Nietzsche predicted cancel culture or social justice warriorism. And I kind of missed the mark there at the beginning when I was like, actually, you know, this is, I'm not a Nietzschean scholar or official historian, but this is like before Bolshevism. Nietzsche not only predicted SJWism and cancel culture, he predicted the rise of communism, of socialism. And I think that this is a way of him just saying, like, it's not in a way of like safe spaces. He's not saying that he needs to be alone so he's not offended by anybody's fucking opinion. Instead, it's like he needs to be alone because everyone else is full of shit, or he needs to be alone because everyone else is brainwashed. It's all fake news. What everyone else is talking about is a totally different language to a man like Zarathustra. And I think that's interesting, and I'm keeping hammering that point home. On the three evils, Zarathustra praises the three great evils that Christian morality condemns: sex, the lust to rule, and selfishness. We know that all of these things are perfectly healthy in a normal manner. And sex is even healthy in abnormal manners. Sex is the only evil for those that hate their body, but it can be joyous affirmation of the present moment of others. For others, sorry. The lust to rule is just another way of saying the will to power. It is the force that drives all change and improvement in the world. We've talked about this also at length. And it only seems evil to those who remain subservient. Selfishness is little more than taking pride in enjoying oneself. Only the cowardly who have reason to be ashamed of themselves might find selfishness unattractive. So we can see here also why Crowley claimed that Nietzsche was a prophet of Thelema. We can see this right here: sex, the lust to rule, and selfishness. On the three evils, another dream passage, Zarathustra weighs the world and comments on the three evils of sensuality, the lust to rule, and selfishness. Zarathustra typically overturned the traditional valuation. The great noon or midday approaches. On the three evils has two parts. In the first part, Zarathustra has a sweet dream, in which he stands on a mountaintop overlooking the world. He finds that the world can be weighed and comprehended instead of prophesying an impending doom, as other dreams have done. This dream confirms the power that Zarathustra has found in his solitude. Zarathustra's dream does not look upon the world curiously or fearfully. In this dream, the whole world is his to comprehend. When Zarathustra awakes, he undertakes the task of weighing the three most evil things in the world and trying to free them from their constraints of the old teachings of Christianity. These three great evils all have to do with passion: the sensual passion of sex, the passion to rule, and the passion of the self. Zarathustra must relieve these passions of the weight given to them by teachings of modern virtue and Christianity. Remember, the contention that Dr. Jordan Peterson says when he's talking about Nietzsche is he was looking in a kind of at a post-Christian world. He was like, okay, well, if Christianity is not here to, teach or enforce these morals and ethics, what happens when we kick them out? And that's what this whole book is doing. It's right here. Taking the morals and ethics of Christianity and saying, okay, well, this doesn't make sense anymore, so let's talk about it. Earlier, Zarathustra talked about the benefit of chastity, but here he extols the virtue of sexual pleasure. In sexual pleasure, he says, humanity is moved forward through procreation. The pleasure felt between the man and a woman is symbolic of the greater pleasure that is felt when humanity marries life and the overman is achieved. The passion to rule is the greatest of the passions that Zarathustra must free. What is truly evil about this passion is the necessity of rulers to stoop low to achieve their power. And Zarathustra sees how this is similar to his own weakness. His love for humanity, this final passion that Zarathustra must rescue, is the passion over the selfishness. This is the passion that has been called evil by society. For Zarathustra, however, this passion for the self is the essential thing that takes a person from the depths of life and propels him forward to the overman. By redeeming these three evils and rescuing them from the teachings of morality, Zarathustra seeks to use these former vices for the achievement of the overman. Such a redemption of these evils is necessary if humanity is to progress. On the spirit of gravity, we take life a little too seriously attached to the notions of the universal good and evil, as if we can only be forgiven for living if we are steadfastly follow the good. This is the spirit of gravity, which sees life as a burden to be borne. Zarathustra urges us to learn to love ourselves. Not an easy task, he admits. And to see life not as a test or a burden, but as a joy in which we create our own good and our own evil rather than look for the only way to live. We should be able to say, this is my fucking way. Where is yours? Man is hard to discover, the hardest of all for himself. Zarathustra tells us, and he who has discovered himself is the one who knows that there is no good and evil for all. This is just my way. Where is yours? Thus I answered those who asked me the way, for the way does not exist. If you're watching Mandalorian, you know that this is the way. In this chapter, Zarathustra finally faces his greatest enemy, the spirit of gravity. And this spirit appeared earlier as the dwarf on Zarathustra's shoulder. But his power was not diminished by the riddle of time that Zarathustra gave him. This spirit is the devil of all humanity because it binds men and keeps them from ascending to great heights. Zarathustra begins this speech by recounting the way in which his body opposes the grave. He runs and speaks and writes, which are all actions that make him a being of life. Gravity is a teacher of the grave. It teaches about the grave because it teaches, as Platonism does, the humanity is a soul, and that of the body is something to be overcome. For gravity, the grave is the essential meaning of life. Man is divided into the body and the soul is the greater of those parts. An ascension to the soul is the necessary state of being that one can hope to accomplish. For Zarathustra, this is a lie and an evil that must be overcome. The spirit of gravity is Zarathustra's greatest enemy because it centers all humanity around itself, weighing humanity down in order to defeat such a spirit. Zarathustra must not only banish it, he must replace this spirit and become the new center of gravity for humanity, a center in which humanity is given a new weight in relation to Zarathustra, the weight that the old spirit of gravity gave to humanity was the weight of the self as a citizen. When a man thinks of himself in relation to the society around him, he is reliant upon an outside force to give life an ultimate meaning. Zarathustra knows he must replace this outside force with the truth that all such outside forces are dead. He will stress that the ascension of the Overman is the essential state of being for humanity. Well, let me do a page count here. All right, we're going to keep going. On the old and new tablets. This chapter is broken into 30 parts, and it touches briefly on many of the themes of Nietzsche's philosophy. The tablets under discussion are different moral codes, clearly an allusion to the tablets that bore the 10 Commandments. Throughout this chapter, Zarathustra urges us to break the old tablets of our own moralities. Only world weary and those who hate life would suggest that they know what is good and what is evil, and that these standards are eternal and fixed. The world is in a permanent state of becoming and not in a state of being. Change is the only constant in the universe. And those who preach that there is a fixed moral code are trying to deny the dynamism of life. Dynamism of life. Zarathustra alludes to the Pharisees who had Jesus crucified for trying to create a new system of morals. Zarathustra urges us to be creators like Jesus, although he also feels that dancing and laughing are important ingredients in the well of being any creator. Zarathustra reviews his critique of the old tablets of virtue and proposes new tablets. This chapter is the longest chapter of the book. It is a retrospective of Zarathustra's public teaching. Zarathustra reflects on everything that he has done and what it meant. He also revises his teaching, naming his past mistakes and showing a better way to move forward. As the chapter opens, Zarathustra is sitting among broken tablets that represents the old laws of religion and modernity. He writes upon new tablets that establish new laws and state of being for humanity. Zarathustra recounts his lessons about the creative power of good and evil. He realizes that he was a fool and a madman when he first began to teach to the crowds. Zarathustra then reflects on his teaching of the Overman, and he realizes that the Overman is still the essential state of the new humanity. His teaching is much more centered on the, here it comes, eternal return. The eternal return will be realized when the new humanity returns to the earth to reconstitute it and redeem it from the old ways of teaching. This utopia is now the focus of Zarathustra's teaching. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. The rest of this chapter is a summation of the major themes of Zarathustra's teaching. He says the lessons about topics such as envy and wisdom and selfishness are necessary for the coming age, even if people do not fully comprehend them now. This chapter closes with Zarathustra praying that his will may deliver him to the future that awaits him as a being with great power, and Zarathustra hopes that his will can preserve him from small victories. He needs his will to help him achieve the great victory of the eternal return. Shit makes my dick hard.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I like coffee, bonfires, walks on the beach, old books. But you know what I really like? The paranormal. Strange stories and experiences, psychic phenomena. So, if you're interested, come join me and bring an open mind and a healthy dose of skepticism. And we'll see what happens.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Let's get back into this here. Thank you for hanging on. The Convalescent. In trying to fully face the thoughts of eternal recurrence, Zarathustra is overcome with the nausea and falls unconscious. After regaining consciousness, he spends the next 7 days convalescing. Then he speaks about how humans are the cruelest of animals. We love to watch others in pain, and we call this fascination pity. Zarathustra's nausea comes over him with the thought that if everything occurs eternally, that means the humans and their mediocrity and their smallness must also recur without change. Zarathustra's animals respond that his destiny is to be the teacher of eternal recurrence. Remember, this is how we got here. This eternal recurrence, or I've been calling it eternal reoccurrence, is the whole reason that this 30, hold on, wait a minute. It's got to be like 33 hours of podcasting. The reason that we're here is because of the eternal recurrence from True Detective season 1, where Rust Cole is dealing with the pedophiles in their little compound, and the guy's Reggie Ledoux's like, it's a flat time is a flat circle, and Rush looks at him and goes, "What is that? Nietzsche, motherfucker?" And I was like, what is that? What's that all about? And that's, 33 hours of podcasts ago. That's what 33 or 34 weeks ago. God, it's been that long. It's all because of eternal recurrence, dudes. The convalescent Zarathustra now confronts and calls up from the depths his most abysmal thought. Zarathustra's animals tell him that he is the teacher of eternal recurrence. Thus ends Zarathustra's going under. Zarathustra is awakened one morning by a deep abyss rising inside him. And he runs out of his cave screaming like a madman and frightening the animals around him. He pleads with the abyss to rise up so that he can confront it. After his yelling, he collapses like a dead man and long remains as if dead, and his animals stay by his side for 7 days, and they bring him food. When he awakens, they speak to him. And they tell him that the world awaits you like a garden. Zarathustra's sickness is a representative of humanity's sickness. It is a universal condition of seeking revenge for being imprisoned in time. I need to take a second to make a note of this. Imprisoned in time. It links with something else I'm doing. When he awakens, it is the animals around him that begin to speak. It is their speech that gives the reader the fullest view of eternal return. The animals speak for all things, and they say that all of the earth is awaiting his return. The fact that the animals begin speaking does not represent a change of being for them. Instead, it represents Zarathustra's new ability to speak to all creations on a natural level. He can understand the animals just as he can understand the rest of nature. If you recall the episode when we did the Convalescent, I actually made a comment about that. My comment was a little bit flippy, and I think, if I remember correctly, it was like, whoa, when he was eating peyote, like he gets nausea and then passes out. When he wakes up, he can talk to animals. But there's the reason for that. Zarathustra criticizes the animals for having watched him suffer for 7 days, although this criticism seems unfair because the animals helped him during that time. Zarathustra is actually condemning mankind. It is humanity, he says, that needs to be helped by those who are less great. According to Zarathustra, society has created a great barrier. Society deems certain human beings as being greater than others, but even these great humans are unable to attain the highest positions of power that gods occupy. This has made humanity a cruel race. Zarathustra's sickness is actually a realization that hierarchy in humanity is still a necessity. Circle back, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about the necessity of hierarchy, specifically with that same vocabulary. Is still a necessity even in the eternal return. Zarathustra had envisioned a society free from the need of the lower ranks of humanity, but he finds that these lower ranks still exist. He is still consumed with the human desire for revenge, a state he must overcome. If he is to will himself to ascend beyond humanity, Zarathustra's great challenge is to will the order of rank in humanity. He must allow the small man to exist, but only because he wills it. On the next one, on the great longing, Zarathustra addresses his soul, speaking of how he was given everything to it to enrich it. But who should be grateful, himself as the giver or his soul as the receiver? On the great yearning, Zarathustra speaks to his soul. On the great longing, as Zarathustra finishes his song, he falls into a deep stillness where he contemplates the inner thoughts of his being. In this song, he celebrates the gifts that he has given his soul. Zarathustra has now been redeemed. His nature of revenge has subsided, and he takes joy in the freedom he has given his soul. He prepares his soul now to sing a new song, a song that has not been sung before. He believes that this new song will make him a kind of new god. Nietzsche, pick up line 1, Jack Kirby calling, or maybe it's vice versa. Jack Kirby, pick up line 1, it's Friedrich Nietzsche calling. Zarathustra is now the master and redeemer of his own soul. This is the culmination of redemption that has been building up since the end of part 2. Zarathustra has now discovered the will to power, and he knows the true nature of revenge. A nature that holds mankind captive within time again. Within time. Captive within time. He has looked into the heavens and has seen that there are no gods there. Only speech constitutes being. Zarathustra knows that there is nothing in the skies that resembles a god. And the earth is the only thing that can make mankind sacred. Zarathustra prophesies that he will return as a god through his music. After he has attained the highest victory, Zarathustra's prophecy tells of the return of Dionysus. I will drink to that. The Greek god Dionysus will not return to a world of multiple gods, as was ancient Greece. Instead, Dionysus will come to rule over a world burnt by death of the one God. In the vacuum of spirituality that is left by that death, Dionysus represents the ascension of mankind to a new kind of godlike state, the eternal return, the state of the overman. On the dancing song, Zarathustra dances with life. Portrayed as a woman, he whispers in her ear that he knows of the eternal recurrence. The chapter ends with the bell tolling and the calm that all joy wants eternity. Zarathustra can now look into life's eyes, and what does Zarathustra whisper into life's ear? Zarathustra sings the song to himself when he is completely alone in his cave, and the song of joy becomes because he has fully been redeemed. Zarathustra has finally achieved the redeemed state he has sought ever since he left his disciples. The song is a conversation with life. Unlike the previous conversation with life, however, Zarathustra finds that life is jealous of his great wisdom. Zarathustra try that again. Zarathustra calms her jealousy because his wisdom is no longer in opposition to life. His wisdom now loves life more than anything. As a speech ends, Zarathustra and life weep together as they gaze at the green meadow below them. In this speech, Zarathustra has learned to love life completely, a state that he was not able to achieve before his enlightenment. For Zarathustra, life has been transformed, not through the force of the whip, as life says. It is Zarathustra's force that eventually tames her like a wild animal. And he eventually becomes lovers, and Zarathustra marries life. And their passion is symbolized by the sexual pleasure that man and women can feel. For Zarathustra, this love of life is the greatest pleasure. This chapter ends when a clock strikes midnight by the 12th toll. Zarathustra proclaims that his joy has reached an eternal state. Well, the 7 seals, or the yes and amen song. Zarathustra finally comes to full acceptance of the eternal recurrence, singing the joyous refrain, "For I love you, O eternity." affirming the eternal reoccurrence. This was originally the conclusion of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's a giant... I was going to be very droll. It's going to be very questionably... vulgar. But I guess what I should say is, yeah, the end of this thing does seem like the end of it, because it's a giant, money shot. Affirming the eternal recurrence. This was originally the conclusion of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Nietzsche adds this fourth part several months later. Nietzsche's notes suggest that he thought of it as an interlude and not as a final completion. This final chapter of part 3 echoes the final book of the Bible, the book of Revelations. This is the 66th chapter of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and Revelations is the 66th book of the Bible. Each part of this chapter relates the breaking of a seal that brings about a new phase of the new humanity. Similarly, in Revelations, the breaking of the 7 seals unleashes an apocalyptic terror upon earth. Unlike Revelations, the breaking of those seals does not signal death to the earth. Instead, it signals the marriage between Zarathustra, the new god, and life. In the first part, Zarathustra is a soothsayer, bringing redemption to the earth. The second part recounts Zarathustra's wrath for mankind, but his wrath is assuaged by his love of the woman of eternity. The third part affirms Zarathustra's creative breath, and affirms his place as the divine being. The fourth part relates Zarathustra's mission in his new divine being. He is to free the nature of things from the constraints of the old world and bring about the truth of the eternal return. The final part relates life and nature like an ocean full of possibilities to be discovered. The discovery of all that is infinite is Zarathustra's new goal. The 6th and 7th part culminate with the image of Zarathustra flying over the world and over humanity, an image that has been a part of Zarathustra's ultimate goal since the beginning of the book. For Zarathustra and his new bride, there is neither up nor down or out or back. Zarathustra has fulfilled his destiny and has been wedded to life and eternity. This final chapter of the book shows Zarathustra's ascension to the highest point of divinity. He has now achieved the state of the overman, and he no longer seeks revenge. Man, that's good. But I see what it means, how it calls back the beginning of the book, the very beginning, when Zarathustra was watching the tightrope walker, the rope dancer, right? He says, look, this is mankind. The other side of the rope there is the overman, and this here is the going under. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. The honey sacrifice. Rather than descend once more among men, Zarathustra ascends to the highest mountain and waits there for people to come to him. Years now have passed since Zarathustra's affirmation of eternal recurrence. He is again back at his cave, sitting on a rock and looking out over winding abysses. He waits for the right time to descend on the world of human beings again, and Zarathustra converses with the animals. They want to know whether he has found happiness. Zarathustra responds that he's not concerned with happiness, but with his work. His work involves descending down again to humankind and teaching the eternal recurrence. Many years have passed, and Zarathustra is an old man, and he is sitting on his mountain and speaking with his animals, and Zarathustra has found complete happiness, but he hides his happiness from the animals. Although he is content in his happiness, he still has work ahead of him. And Zarathustra says that his happiness is a lure to others, and he compares himself to that of a fisherman that uses his happiness. Remember, he's a hunter and a fisherman. I'm trying to remember when, but it makes me dizzy. Zarathustra knows that he must once again descend and encounter mankind again in order to lure them to the experience of the same kind of happiness. The next speech is the cry of distress. Sitting outside his cave, Zarathustra is joined by the soothsayer from part 2, and he tells Zarathustra that he must confront his final sin, which is pity. Zarathustra hears a cry of distress, and he assumes comes from the higher man, and he goes in search of him. Again, sitting in his stone before his cave, Zarathustra confronts the soothsayer's doctrine of nihilism. All is the same, nothing is worthwhile, the world is without meaning, knowing chokes. The soothsayer tempts Zarathustra with a final temptation, pity for the superior human. The superior human is not the last human, but not the overhuman either. Next, if you remember, we go and we meet the two kings. On his search, Zarathustra, remember, he's wandering around the side of his mountain trying to find where this cry of distress is coming from. Zarathustra encounters two kings on the road who were driving an ass. They have abandoned their kingdoms as they have been made nauseous by the good society of mediocre people who are eager only to please and to enjoy small pleasures. The kings are delighted when Zarathustra tells them that he is in searching for the higher man. Zarathustra directs them to his cave and invites them to wait for him there. This is like the gather. This is like how the Avengers got together. He's gathering all these high-ish men. So I don't know if these guys are all superior humans. I don't think they're all overmen. I could be wrong. Conversations with the kings as Zarathustra begins his morning walk and encounters the two kings and an ass. And the first of 7 encounters with others who have accepted some parts of his teaching but have not quite gotten it. They are all examples of superior humans, yes, referred to in previous sections. On the cry, okay, so Grade Saver lumps the cry of distress and the conversation with the kings together. And it does this going here forward. It'll do this from time to time. I'll try to call it out so you guys get the correct picture of it. So this is the Grade Saver summary of the cry of distress and the conversation of the kings, the last 2 speeches that we did. The next day, the soothsayer arrives at Zarathustra's cave. Zarathustra invites the soothsayer to be his guest at his table, but the soothsayer tries to make Zarathustra afraid. The soothsayer tells him that soon others will arrive who will ruin his solitude. He will no longer be able to reflect on his being, and his cheerfulness will be gone. The soothsayer is tempting Zarathustra into despair, a despair that will cause him not to finish the work he has started. Soon they hear a cry from someone in need, and Zarathustra tells the soothsayer the man who cried out is the superior man. Zarathustra is eager to show the soothsayer that nothing will ruin the happiness in his cave. And he leaves the soothsayer to begin a trek down the mountains to find this superior man. Zarathustra meets 2 kings leading a donkey. Well, that's boring. 2 kings driving an ass is way better. These kings are bringing the donkey as a gift for the ultimate ruler of all rulers, just as Jesus' disciples had brought a donkey for him to ride into Jerusalem. The kings have tired of dealing with the rabble and are seeking an escape from society. They believe Zarathustra will be able to bring this escape to them. Instead, Zarathustra gives them a blasphemous rhyme, while coming of Jesus meant the end of all kings and signaled the true descent of society with the coming of Jesus Christ. The rabble believed that they could ascend the heavens and the kings lost their power. The kings enjoy Zarathustra's rhyme. They tell him that all enemies still portray him as the devil. But the kings still admire his teachings. They especially admire his teachings on war and on being a long speech about blood battles and their inherent nobility. Kings are the first in a line of people that Zarathustra meets in his search for the superior man. Many of these chapters deal with the nature of politics and the rule of the mob. The kings, as well as other people Zarathustra meets on their way to a donkey festival, which we're also going to talk about this evening, the Ass Festival. It's a great place. To meet the new ruler, the kings are tired of the rule of the mob, and they eagerly await this new ruler. So if you remember, after the two kings, Zarathustra finds a leech. Zarathustra literally stumbles upon a man laying down in a swamp, trying to attract leeches to his arm. He represents the conscientious in spirit, one who wishes to free himself or to suck away all the prejudices and assumptions that underlie his thinking. As with the kings, Zarathustra invites him to wait in his cave, and then he continues his journey. Zarathustra encounters one who is a conscientious in spirit. Zarathustra encounters a magician. This is a magician. This is the next speech. And then Great Saver lumps the leech and the magician together. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Zarathustra encounters a magician writhing on the ground and tortured by a thought. After a while, Zarathustra becomes angry and accuses him of counterfeiting. The magician confesses, saying that he was pretending to be an ascetic of the spirit in an effort to test Zarathustra. We should know by now, you don't test Zarathustra. Zarathustra tests you. Zarathustra points out that he wasn't totally pretending. That is, he, in some sense, an ascetic. The magician wants to convince others that he is a great man, but he knows himself that he is not that great. Zarathustra admires the magician for wanting to be great and for admitting that he is not great. As with others, he directs the magician to his cave, and then he continues on his way. In the Existentialism paper, Kaufman suggests the sorcerer encountered here is, in part, at least, Wagner. I haven't been keeping track of all that. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. The Existentialism paper kind of falls apart here towards the end. I wasn't going to mention it, but there it is. All right, so Great Saver, the Leech, and the Magician. In the Leech, Zarathustra stumbles upon a man, and the man screams out in pain. Zarathustra tries to calm him with a parable, but the parable is actually meant to insult the man. The man takes offense at Zarathustra's parable, and he challenges him. Zarathustra sees that the man is bleeding. He's not been bitten by a beast. Zarathustra takes pity on this man and invites him to rest in his cave. The man is gratefully identified himself as the conscientious of spirit. The man tells of Zarathustra that he actually cut himself and allowed leeches to feed on him in order to find Zarathustra to become one with his teachings. The man represents the scientific and scholarly spirit, knowledge without charm or spirit. This man only sees the value in the small part of the world that is knowable, and he seeks Zarathustra's knowledge in order to somehow increase his own knowledge and overcome the human intuition to fear. Zarathustra insults the man, but still invites the man to his cave to dine and discuss. Zarathustra then runs into an old rival, the old sorcerer. This man has proclaimed himself to be the greatest man of his age. Zarathustra first thinks this is the superior man who he heard cry out. But he is again mistaken. The man is thrashing around like a madman, and Zarathustra yells at him to get him to stop. And the sorcerer then begins to sing a series of songs to Zarathustra that echoes Zarathustra's own teachings. The sorcerer proclaims that he has been given the gift of the gods, and he has attained divinity. The sorcerer's song appears to be the coming of Dionysus. Zarathustra is fucking furious at this sorcerer, and he begins to beat him with his staff, and the sorcerer begs him to stop and flatters Zarathustra, telling him that he is the saint of knowledge. Eventually, Zarathustra relents and invites him to his cave as well. The sorcerer represents the long battle between poetry and philosophy. The sorcerer, representing the poet, relays that he himself has found a way to become divine, and Zarathustra calls him a deceiver, saying that poetry is a force that leads men to create other gods. The sorcerer eventually breaks down, admitting that it is Zarathustra he seeks. The sorcerer asks Zarathustra to take pity on him, and Zarathustra invites another person to his cave for conversation. Retired, Zarathustra encounters the last pope, who is mourning the fact that God is dead, and he seeks out Zarathustra as the most pious of all of those who do not believe in God. And he tells how God died from pitying humankind too much. Zarathustra criticizes God for having made us so poorly, and then pushing us, being unable to do his bidding, and the Pope is impressed with Zarathustra, and Zarathustra directs him to his cave. Zarathustra encounters a retired pope. The old pope admits he knows about the death of God. The old pope, who has some things to tell Zarathustra about God. One of the old pope's quips: whoever praises him as a god of love does not think highly enough of love itself. The ugliest man. Zarathustra enters a valley where no animals live and encounters the ugliest man. The man who killed God. Talk about making your world small. Although he is momentarily stunned by pity, Zarathustra overcomes this pity and returns to his senses. The great pity people feel for the ugliest man's suffering offends his sense of shame, and he killed God because God could not see everything and know everything about him. The most of all, because God felt pity. All these others, Zarathustra directs the ugliest man to his cave. Zarathustra encounters the ugliest man, and thus tempted by pity. Okay, so Gradesaver groups the ugliest human and the voluntary beggar together. So this is Sparknotes, the voluntary beggar. Zarathustra encounters a voluntary beggar who was once rich but becomes sick of rich people and chose to be poor. He found the poor just as nauseating as the rich, however, and so he has come to sit among cows, hoping to learn from them how to chew the cud, and Zarathustra invites him to go to his cave. Existentialism paper. Zarathustra encounters one who gave away all of his riches to become a beggar. The conversation concerns the gift-giving virtue. Zarathustra explains that it is harder to give rightly than to receive rightly. Again, I believe this is him being like, yo, communism, I'm looking at you. The retired, the ugliest human, and the voluntary beggar. Gradesaver. When Zarathustra leaves the magician, he sees another man dressed in black. like Johnny Cash and shit, and is angry at finding another follower of the dark arts. This man is not a sorcerer. He is the last pope to have seen God before God's death, and Zarathustra wants to know whether pity choked God to death. The Pope does not have an answer, but admits that for him, God has also died. And Zarathustra gave him permission to speak ill of God now that he has died, and the Pope is glad to be able to do so. The Pope tells Zarathustra that God was subjected to the rule of man. The Pope recognized in Zarathustra the making of another kind of God, one that will take him beyond good and evil. As the chapter closes, the Pope lays his hands on Zarathustra in a kind of blessing ceremony. The next man that Zarathustra meets is the ugliest human being. Again, gives Zarathustra an explanation for the death of God. The ugliest man says to Zarathustra that he himself is the one who murdered God because he could not stand the idea of a God who saw him and pitied him. And Zarathustra is also moved to pity, but unlike God, Zarathustra attempted to move beyond pity to a hardness of heart. I'm gonna harden my heart. The ugliest man tries to keep Zarathustra from escaping from him by telling him that he is already rich even though he is ugly. He is even rich with the ugliness, rich with what is terrible. It is the ugliest man who recognized the ass festival in order to comfort himself. He organized the ass festival in order to comfort himself. This ass festival... brother. As Zarathustra continues to walk, he finds the voluntary beggar. When Zarathustra finds him, he is speaking to a group of cows, and Zarathustra demands to know what the man seeks to gain by speaking to these cows. And the man answered the same thing: you seek happiness on earth. The man is trying to learn the secret of happiness from the cows, for he says, unless we are converted and become as cows, we will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. When Zarathustra makes the man explain himself, he learns the man is a voluntary beggar. The man became sick of his wealth and threw it all away. Communism, social justice warriorism. I was going to add on to it. I'm not. The man became so sick of society and culture that he decided to go to the animals to find happiness. Although Zarathustra finds this man in animals to be foolish, the beggar still is notably because he is attempting to overcome the structures of the world by voluntarily refusing wealth and by seeking his redemption, not in religion, but in nature. He joins Zarathustra as a seeker of the true way to the eternal return. The shadow. Zarathustra finds himself pursued by his own shadow. His shadow has followed Zarathustra everywhere and has been bold in its pursuit of truth and knowledge. Now the shadow finds itself lost without a goal. Zarathustra directs the shadow to his cave, and then he continues on his way without the shadow. The Existentialism paper. Remember how I said it was like dwindling? The Existentialism paper says, Zarathustra encounters his shadow. Okay, and so we're going to wrap up the shadow and At Noon with the Grade Saver all together after this. This is At Noon. Zarathustra lies down under a tree at noon and takes a nap, enraptured at how perfect the world seems. The Existentialism paper. Zarathustra is alone again. The sun climbs to its zenith, and there are a number of Dionysian themes and images in Zarathustra's noonday address to his heart. Grade Saver, The Shadow, and At Noon. Zarathustra has become annoyed by the proliferation of people on his mountain and wonders where his solitude has gone. This is exactly what the soothsayer told him was going to happen. There is one more individual that Zarathustra has left to meet, his own shadow. His shadow has followed Zarathustra through each step of his teaching. His shadow has found that it has become a nihilist, finding nothing to be true anymore. And Zarathustra is upset to find that one who is possibly the closest to his teachings and to himself has become upset and find that the one who possibly the closest to his teachings and to find himself has become a nihilist. For now, however, there is nothing that he can say to the shadow to refute such an idea. So I always say like magic is psychology. And here it is, right? Fucking Zarathustra in his shadow. Literally, it's a shadow self. The shadow is a representation of one of the consequences of Zarathustra's teaching, although it is not the result of that Zarathustra wants. The shadow represents the criticisms of Zarathustra's enemies. People that leave bad comments and and reviews for my podcast. Who is saying his teachings is nothing but a bitter refutation of God and replacing belief with a wicked nihilism. Zarathustra warns the shadow not to cut his journey short. This would result in a narrow-minded worldview, something just as harmful as belief in God and Christianity. Zarathustra has met the final person he will meet this day, and after wandering in solitude, he stops by a tree and rests beside it. He lies down, and as he begins to fall asleep, he begins to speak to his own heart, and Zarathustra recounts the many miles and lands he has traversed to come to his current blissful happiness. His language shows his love of nature and of all that is around him. Zarathustra is in an utter state of bliss. When he awakens, he finds that the sun is still overhead, which means he has not slept very long. In respite in this narrative of part 4 is a Dionysian psalm about Zarathustra's happiness. It contains imagery of divinity and an eternity of bliss. Zarathustra is tempted to remain at rest, to selfishly enjoy his happiness, a result not entirely antithetical to his own teaching. He also knows that his work is only half completed, for he set out that morning to find those who were seeking him. Although he found those individuals, he has not yet converted them to his true teachings, so his work is still ahead. The welcome. Zarathustra returns to his cave, where he hears once more the cry of distress that he thought came from the higher man. Entering his cave, he realizes that it's come collectively from all those he encountered during the day, and Zarathustra speaks to his assembly, telling them that they are not overmen, and that he has not been searching for him. They are still too weak, still seeking consideration from others and bearing still some of the prejudices of the past. They are mere bridges to the overman, signs that something greater is on its way. Zarathustra returns to his cave and finds that all those that he had encountered on his morning walk. The Last Supper. Zarathustra, at the soothsayer's urging, the company prepares a feast together. The Existentialism paper says Zarathustra has a Last Supper with the superior humans and the soothsayer. So Gradesaver lumps the welcome and the Last Supper together, and this is what it says. In the late afternoon, Zarathustra returns to his cave. As he approaches, he once again hears the cry of distress. This time, the cry comes from multiple voices in his cave. As he enters the cave, he sees all of the characters from the day gathered there. The ugliest human has draped himself in a purple sash, because he loves to disguise himself in act beautiful. Zarathustra is disappointed to realize that the cry of the higher man was actually the collective cry of all these characters. One of the kings tries to explain that there will be another higher man coming after them, but Zarathustra rebuffs the king, telling him that there are not the ones for which he has been waiting. Zarathustra begins a speech in which he imagines his true children and their return to him. He imagines that these children have become like lions in the world. The soothsayer interrupts Zarathustra's speech by saying that preparations of supper need to be started, and the kings offer their wine, and several of their guests, including Zarathustra, only want water. The Last Supper begins with Zarathustra quoting Jesus saying, "Man does not live by bread alone." Instead, Zarathustra offers 2 sacrificial lambs for dinner. The voluntary beggar refuses the food for his customary pittance. In these 2 speeches, Zarathustra discovers that people he met during the day were really the ones he heard crying out in distress. This disappoints him because he imagined that the higher man would be of a purer nature than these men. The Last Supper that they all enjoy is a parody of the biblical Last Supper of Jesus and his disciples, and Zarathustra brings Passover lambs, but he continues to insult his guests in a joking manner, calling one of the kings an ass. On the higher man, at supper, Zarathustra speaks to his companions about the higher man. Zarathustra learns early on that there is no use in talking to the mob about an overman, since they all claim that everyone is equal before God. God is dead now, and man must overcome in order to create the overman. Self-overcoming requires courage, evil, suffering, self-motivation, and solitude. Zarathustra suggests to the higher men around him that they should not be sad, for they are not overmen. Or that they should not be sad that they are not overmen. What is most important is that they should mistrust everything unconditionally and should learn to laugh and to dance. Hear, hear. Existentialism paper. At this supper, Zarathustra reviews his teachings for the superior humans, and his final advice to the superior humans is that they should learn to laugh. The Song of Melancholy. Zarathustra steps outside, and the magician sings to the others. The poem centers on melancholy, surmise that he is not a seeker after the truth, but only a fool, or only a poet. Zarathustra steps out of his cave for a bit for fresh air, and within the cave, the sorcerer sings the Song of Melancholy. So, Great Saver wraps up the higher man, the Song of Melancholy, and the next 2 on science and among the daughters of the desert all together. So we're just going to push on science. The man who is conscientious in spirit asserts that science originated in fear. Humans feared other animals and their own animal instincts and refined this fear into science. Zarathustra, returning to the cave, hears this last bit and suggests that science was born from refining our courage, not our fear. Existentialism says Zarathustra comes back to the cave just as the sorcerer and the conscientious in spirit were having an argument. The next speech is on among the daughters of the wilderness. Zarathustra's shadow sings about a time when he was in the Orient, far from home, and surrounded with all sorts of delights. Existentialism says now that wanderer and shadow has a song to sing. And Great Saver on the higher man, the Song of Melancholy, on science and among the daughters of the desert says, oh, this is going long. After the supper, Zarathustra begins a long speech about the higher man. He recounts his folly from the prologue, explaining how he gave his message to the wrong people. Zarathustra tells these men to temper their search because in reality, the highest state that they seek is unavailable to them. Zarathustra does not want these men's failures to give his own teaching a bad name. He warns them not to be lastlings, the measure of what a true follower of Zarathustra should be. He knows these men will only find failure in their search, so he implores them to moderate their expectations. I've been in corporate America enough times to know what moderate their expectations means. Zarathustra longs to be with his animals and leaves the cave to find them. And when he leaves, the sorcerer tells the men in the cave that he is possessed by a devil, the true enemy of Zarathustra. The sorcerer, however, is cunningly attempting to lead the higher men astray from Zarathustra's teaching, just as he tried to lead Zarathustra astray when he sang his earlier Dionysian song. The sorcerer began to claim that Zarathustra is only a poet, thereby confusing the men gathered because they respect Zarathustra's teaching so much. By doing this, the sorcerer is elevating himself to Zarathustra's level in an effort to attain the glory of his teachings for himself. The first part of the sorcerer's song proclaims that night is coming to all things, even Zarathustra in his teachings. The song laments that in reality there is no true teaching, that man of science and scholarship comes to Zarathustra's defense, however, saying that Zarathustra's teachings, like the pursuit of science, make all things knowable. Both of these interpretations and teachings are false, and Zarathustra's shadow knows it. He is too weak to combat the teachings, however, and a melancholy falls over the group. Instead, he begins to sing a mocking song about a good European in a desert surrounded by maidens of paradise. The song mocks the European moral superiority and skepticism. As the song ends, the cave is filled with laughter. The awakening. Zarathustra steps outside again and is pleased that his companions and he have chased away the spirit of gravity, but then he sees them all inside praying to the king's ass. The donkey the two kings were driving about. Much of the laughter following the song of the wanderer in the shadow, Zarathustra again slips out into the open air, and when he returns to the cave, all the guests, all these superior humans, are all on their knees worshiping the ass. I mean, I've been there. So Great Saver wraps up the Awakening and the Ass Festival together. So we're going to move to Sparknotes, the Ass Festival. Zarathustra leaps and chastises his guest for praying to the ass. However, he takes this as a good sign, since it shows that they are convalescing. The Ass Festival is a lively exchange between Zarathustra and the superior humans, states the Existentialism paper. The Awakening and the Ass Festival. As evening falls, Zarathustra hears laughing from inside the cave, and he tries to comfort himself by saying that the day must be a success if they are laughing, even after Zarathustra explains how they are not higher men that he truly seeks. He shrugs off their laughter as their own way of trying to ascend to the heights of his teaching. Soon, however, the laughter ceases and a quiet comes over the cave. Zarathustra sneaks in to see what they are doing, and to his surprise, he finds them all on their knees praying, and he thinks they have all gone mad. But in listening to their prayer, he realizes that they are really praying to the donkey. It is the start of the ass festival. It's the start of the ass festival. Zarathustra interrupts the praying and demands to know what his guests are doing, believing that they have all gone mad. They tell him that the old god lives again, that the ugliest human being brought him back, and they are worshiping the donkey as a form of this god, a form that they can all worship. Zarathustra mocks them and berates them from their foolishness, and he tells them that even though they need to be children to enter into the kingdom of heaven is not the kingdom for which they should strive. The kingdom for which they should strive is the kingdom of earth. This festival of the ass is a festival that mocks modern Christianity. Christian worship has lost all its power. So the higher men might as well worship God in the form of a donkey. This is at least gives them something to believe. Though they know it is stupid, this is perhaps the greatest insight into God is dead theology. The order to continue the murder of God, humanity must mock the old forms of worship. This kills the gravity that once held men to the ground in a carnivalesque manner by taking the power from such rituals. The Drunken song. They all step outside into the cool night, and the ugliest man says that for the first time he is satisfied with his entire life. And others agree. They all turn to Zarathustra in gratitude. Zarathustra sings a song that in many ways is the culmination of the entire book. The world is very deep, full of deep sorrows and deep joys. But while sorrow and suffering want people to aim for something, joy wants only itself for all eternity, because all things in the universe are intimately connected. We cannot wish for an eternity of joy without wishing for the suffering that accompanies this joy. Joy wants the eternity of all things, wants deep eternally. Drunken song, the ugliest man gets the idea of eternal reoccurrence. Thanks to this day, for this time, I am content to having lived my whole life. Zarathustra leads the others out into the deep midnight, into an affirmation of eternal recurrence. So, Great Saver wraps up the Sleepwalker song and the sign together. So, Sparknotes, the sign. Zarathustra rises the next morning to find a lion outside his cave, which he takes to be a sign of the overman's coming. Zarathustra rises triumphantly, realizing he has overcome his final sin, pity for the higher man. The sign, once again, Zarathustra steps forth from his cave and greets the morning sun, and after receiving the sign, that is the time to go down. Zarathustra, having overcome the last temptation, which was pity for the superior humans, Zarathustra begins his descent. He departs the cave glowing and strong, like a morning sun coming out of dark mountains. The Sleepwalker song and the sign. Grade Saver. Hold on. This is going to be the last Zarathustra thing I read in a really long time. I want to do it right. Zarathustra and the higher men leave the cave close to midnight. The ugliest human tells Zarathustra that he begun to appreciate life as the bells toll midnight. Dun, dun, dun. Doom, doom, doom. Zarathustra becomes the ultimate teacher for these men and relates the song of the sleepwalker In the song, mankind is called to waken for the task at hand. The bell that tolls midnight represents the will of the past, for even the dead cry out for the past to be willed. Midnight makes these men lords of the earth as the bell finishes tolling. Zarathustra points these men towards another god, the god of Dionysus, who makes life eternal and sweet. Thus, Zarathustra has taught these higher men the true nature of the eternal return. The final chapter of the book begins as the prologue did. When Zarathustra awakens in the morning, he is greeted by the higher men who are still happy from the night before. And Zarathustra knows that these higher men are not his true children. And he understands that his task has not been completed. And Zarathustra realizes that even though he had pity on these higher men, he can now put his sins behind him. He truly knows the way to teach such men. As the book ends, Zarathustra leaves his cave like a morning sun that emerges from a dark mountain. Pity is the sin that Zarathustra knows people must overcome if they are to understand his teachings of the Overman. But he realizes that he feels pity for each of these higher men. Zarathustra, reflecting on the previous day, understands that he can now put his sin of pity behind him and focus on the work at hand. Thus, Zarathustra speaking can continue in the world. All right. Well, hey, since you've hung on there till the end, like this is the end of Zarathustra, I have this book, The Portable Nietzsche, that I bought with the money from Patreon and Subscribestar supporters. And now that I'm done with the Portable Nietzsche book, since the Spoke Zarathustra is over, if you want it, reach out to me. Go to the website, find a way to reach out to me, or go to the show notes, find a way to reach out to me. And the first person to do so, if you want the book, it's got like some little notes and stuff in the margin or whatever, but it's still in pretty good condition. You know, it's in pretty good condition. I treat books pretty well, you know, not to toot my own horn. But yeah, if you want the book, reach out to me. If you're in the States, I'll send it to you for nothing. And that's it. So there we go. Here, I guess that's it, man. What a sweet ass ending, the eternal recurrence. That means that next week we're going to be doing Thus Spake Zarathustra Part 1. I'm just kidding. Hey, don't forget to check out that Immortal Hour. It's just launching. It's from a good friend and a supporter, a longtime supporter of this show, and I'm very excited to hear the first episode. So don't forget to check that out.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. To Takes a lot of learning and it takes a lot to try. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. While I share the show for free, most things involved with making it are not free. There are hard costs tied to making each episode that I largely pay for out of my pockets. The costs include hosting the website, storing the audio files you listen to, and maintaining and upgrading microphones, cables, soundboards, and other recording equipment which wear out over time. It's always surprising when I look at the list of costs involved in making something, quote, free, unquote. How can you help? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of what I create and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means that I can create the normal schedule of shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellow Craft episodes, by supporting the show. You're not only a fan and a listener, but you are part of helping bring the shows to life and helping to drag these topics into the light. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and your support of my projects. I have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. Supporters are partners, and I obviously am somewhat open-minded. I currently pay for you to listen to the show. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pockets, I volunteer time and talent to our shows. Talent and time that I pay for mostly from my own pocket. What are you supporting? You are supporting the show. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, not to mention the massive amounts of gin and tonic we need to make the gin jihads consumed during production of the show. You're also supporting the equipment it takes to record the show. My voiceover actress, the guy who designs my audio drones, and the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? Hey, I'm proud of what I make, and I feel like I am improving by leaps and bounds all the time. In addition to creating the shows that I and you love and are excited about, I have a full-time commitment and other obligations. But why financial support? Our supporters can help me focus time on the quality and development of the podcasts, and also create the opportunity to reward the people who give their time and talent. Thank you. We can't put into words how much it means for me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and your love of the stories that I tell are what keeps me going. But I can't afford $3 a month. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to sign on to the mailing list and unlock a lot of bonus content. The Abercast is a podcast that investigates the occult, forgotten stories of history and conspiracy theories. We look for unique ways to look and to attack these topics that are often dark, and we like to add context and levity.